The 1820s in Ireland were years of unrest, hunger, and hope. The war with France had ended, but peace brought no relief. Bread was scarce, rents rose, and fields failed. Across Ireland's villages and towns, ordinary families struggled to survive, their voices drowned out by empire. Yet from the cabins and marketplaces came a stirring demand: Catholic emancipation, led by Daniel O'Connell but carried in the hearts of millions. This is not the tale of parliaments and petitions alone, but of the tenant, the widow, and the barefoot child, who all bore the weight of Ireland's fight for dignity. The end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815 had left Europe reshaped, but for Ireland, the aftermath lingered into the 1820s. Wartime demand for food had once lifted Irish prices, but peace meant collapse. By the early years of the decade, tenant farmers who once scraped survival from their plots now found their crops fetching almost nothing at market. Meanwhile, rents to landlords remained as high as ever, with no sympathy for failing harvests. For the ordinary family, this meant leaner meals, longer workdays, and desperate bargains struck to keep a roof overhead. A bowl of thin gruel or a piece of black bread became a daily diet. In the countryside, children foraged for nettles, while mothers bartered scraps of cloth for milk. To survive, neighbors often shared what little they had, weaving webs of quiet solidarity in the face of hunger. The great powers in London debated trade and politics, but in Irish cottages, the real question was simpler: would there be enough to eat tomorrow? The hunger of these years foreshadowed greater crises to come, but it also gave rise to voices demanding justice. For tenant farmers, the 1820s were defined by an endless cycle of rent, debt, and fear. Landlords, often absentee, demanded payment regardless of weather or yield. Failure to pay meant eviction, carried out by sheriffs who tore the thatch from roofs to ensure families could not return. For the ordinary farmer, each season became a gamble. A poor harvest could mean starvation or exile. Families lived under the shadow of this constant threat, working land they would never own, bound by leases designed to keep them vulnerable. In many cases, rents were raised when improvements were made, punishing initiative rather than rewarding it. Smallholders who tried to grow potatoes to sustain their families found themselves feeding both their children and the landlord's purse. This imbalance bred resentment that spread quietly through village talk and chapel meetings. To outsiders, the Irish countryside looked green and fertile, but for the people who tilled its fields, the land was a trap. These years saw whispers of change take root, but for most farmers, each day remained a struggle simply to keep their families on their plot. Amid hardship, Irish women bore the hidden weight of survival. The 1820s demanded endless resilience from mothers, daughters, and widows. Women stretched meager food supplies, patched garments until they fell apart, and worked in fields alongside men, only to return home and tend to children by firelight. Many found seasonal work in towns, as laundresses, seamstresses, or servants, sending small wages back to families in the countryside. In cabins, women often acted as silent negotiators with landlords' agents, pleading for mercy in rent collection. Their labor was undervalued, yet indispensable. Stories whispered of women walking barefoot miles to market with eggs or butter, only to return empty-handed if prices were poor. For widows, survival was even harder. Many faced eviction once their husbands were gone, relying on charity or kinship networks. The church provided spiritual consolation, but practical aid was scarce. Still, women kept households alive, instilling faith and resilience in children who would one day carry Ireland's struggles forward. Their strength was rarely recorded in history books, but in the 1820s, it was women who kept the fragile fabric of Irish life from tearing apart completely. As hunger deepened and evictions rose, rural unrest swept across Ireland in the 1820s. Secret societies like the Ribbon Men emerged, sworn to defend tenants from landlord oppression. These groups, often made up of ordinary farmers and laborers, carried out nighttime raids, tearing down fences, intimidating rent collectors, and punishing informers. For the poor, the Ribbon Men were defenders of justice. For landlords, they were criminals. Behind the violence lay desperation. families pushed to the brink by impossible rents and repeated hunger. In small villages, whispered meetings by candlelight planned resistance, even as participants risked imprisonment or transport if caught. Ordinary people, even those uninvolved, often sympathized, understanding that rebellion was born not from malice but necessity. Children would peer from cabin doors as men in dark coats disappeared into the night, their purpose unspoken but understood. Though the ribbon men could not break the power of landlords, their defiance signaled that the Irish poor were no longer willing to suffer in silence. For many, these actions embodied a dangerous but vital truth, that justice sometimes came not from law, but from the courage of neighbors standing together. The Catholic Church became a refuge for the poor during the 1820s, even as it struggled under restrictions. Priests, often from humble origins themselves, lived among the people, hearing confessions in cottages, blessing marriages, and offering hope in desperate times. The chapel became more than a place of worship, it was the heart of community life. On Sundays, barefoot families crowded inside, not only for Mass but to hear news and share grievances. Priests often mediated disputes between tenants and landlords, though their influence varied. Some landlords tolerated priests, while others saw them as dangerous agitators. The growing Catholic Association, led by Daniel O'Connell, relied heavily on parish priests to rally support for emancipation. Ordinary people who had little voice in politics found strength in collective prayer and the authority of their clergy. Children learned catechism by hearthlight, often the only formal education available. For many families, the priests symbolized stability in an unstable world. Their presence reminded the people that they were not forgotten, that dignity and justice were worth striving for, even when bread was scarce. In the 1820s, faith was not just spiritual, it was survival.
Welcome to Emerald Chronicle, your window into the rich tapestry of Ireland's past. If you're captivated by Irish history, myths, legends, and folktales, this is the place where the stories of Ireland come alive. From the sweeping battles of ancient kings to the quiet lives of ordinary villagers, from the mystical tales of druids and heroes to the enduring folklore that shaped the Emerald Isle, our channel brings every corner of Ireland's heritage to vivid life. Every video is crafted with care to inform, inspire, and immerse. Explore the daring exploits of legendary warriors, uncover the secrets of sacred stone circles, and wander through the landscapes where myths were born. We celebrate the voices of Ireland, past and present, giving you a deeper understanding of a culture steeped in history and imagination. By subscribing to Emerald Chronicle, you join a growing community of history enthusiasts, storytellers, and curious minds eager to discover Ireland's extraordinary legacy. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and embark on this journey with us. Together, we'll honor the past, celebrate Ireland's legends, and keep its folklore alive for generations to come. Subscribe today and become part of the story.
No figure loomed larger over the 1820s than Daniel O'Connell, the liberator. Yet O'Connell's power did not come from Parliament alone, it was carried on the backs of ordinary Irish men and women who supported his cause for Catholic emancipation. Peasants saved pennies to pay the Catholic rent, a small weekly contribution that gave the movement strength. Families who could barely afford bread still found coins to drop into collection boxes after Massachusetts. O'Connell's speeches drew massive crowds, where farmers, servants, and shopkeepers gathered to hear their struggles echoed in his words. For them, O'Connell was not a distant politician but a champion who spoke their truth. Even illiterate laborers knew his name, passing it from mouth to mouth like a prayer. While London debated, the people mobilized, their faith in O'Connell tied to the hope of a better future. For the first time, ordinary Irish Catholics felt they had a voice, however faint, in shaping their destiny. The decade's struggles thus became not only about survival but about awakening political power, seated in the villages and chapels of the poor. In Ireland's small towns, the 1820s brought hardship of a different kind. Markets overflowed with goods, yet many families had little money to buy. Women came barefoot, carrying baskets of eggs or butter, hoping for a fair price. But English imports often undercut local trade, leaving Irish sellers with empty purses. Artisans suffered too. Weavers, cobblers, and blacksmiths struggled to compete with mass-produced goods flooding from Britain's factories. Unemployment grew, and poverty deepened in narrow lanes crowded with beggars. Children, thin and hollow-eyed, tugged at passers-by for scraps. In market squares, charity sermons were preached, but practical help was scarce. Workhouses had not yet spread across Ireland, leaving families to rely on parish relief or the kindness of neighbors. Still, the town remained a gathering point. News of O'Connell's campaign traveled swiftly through busy markets, and ordinary people debated politics between stalls of potatoes and cloth. Even in poverty, the town square carried a sense of community, a reminder that while empire's policies might impoverish them, the Irish poor still had each other. For many, that solidarity was as valuable as any coin. The 1820s left their harshest mark on children. Born into cabins where hunger was constant, many never reached adulthood. Infant mortality was high, and diseases like typhus spread easily through poor households. Childhood meant labor. Boys herded animals or worked in fields, while girls carried water, minded siblings, and spun thread by firelight. Few saw the inside of a classroom, though hedge schools sometimes offered a glimmer of learning in secret fields or barns. Children's laughter still echoed in villages, in games of stones or songs passed down, but it was often cut short by hardship. Many went barefoot year-round, their feet hardened against frozen ground. Orphans roamed town streets, surviving on charity or theft. Yet despite poverty, children carried hope. They memorized prayers, sang songs of their ancestors, and absorbed the stories told by grandparents, stories that preserved identity even when the future seemed bleak. For parents, each child represented both a burden and a blessing, another mouth to feed, but also a reason to endure. The children of the 1820s were raised on scarcity, but they carried forward the resilience of generations. While mass emigration would come later, the 1820s saw its early roots. Families, broken by poverty, began to look westward to America or across the sea to Britain. A ticket was costly, but some sold livestock or borrowed from relatives abroad to make the journey. Those who left were often the strongest, young men and women seeking wages in English cities or a chance at farmland overseas. For those who remained, farewells were wrenching. Mothers clutched children at docksides, knowing they might never see them again. Letters from emigrants became prized treasures, read aloud by firelight, carrying news of opportunity and hardship in equal measure. For many, emigration was not a choice but a last resort, the only way to escape endless hunger and landlord tyranny. Each departure weakened communities, yet also planted seeds of resilience abroad, forging the Irish diaspora that would become vital in later struggles for freedom. The 1820s emigration trickle foreshadowed the flood to come, as ordinary Irish people began to seek survival not on their native soil, but across the sea. Despite relentless hardship, the 1820s carried a current of hope. Catholic emancipation was no longer a dream but a movement, rooted in pennies given by the poor and voices lifted in prayer. In cabins and chapels, people spoke with new confidence about dignity and rights. Though hunger haunted them, they refused to surrender identity. Songs were sung in Gaelic, stories retold by hearths, and faith carried forward even as fields failed. Ordinary people found courage in solidarity, in neighbors who shared food, in priests who rallied communities, and in the knowledge that their struggles were not in vain. The decade closed with uncertainty, but also momentum. O'Connell's cause was gathering force, and the Irish poor knew their sacrifices were part of a greater story. For them, the question was not whether change would come, but when. Their lives remained precarious, yet their spirits endured, proving that even in poverty, hope could flourish. The 1820s carved deep scars on Ireland's poor, but also lit sparks of defiance. Hunger, eviction, and poverty pressed heavily, yet ordinary men and women gave their pennies, their prayers, and their voices to a cause greater than themselves. They believed that justice, though distant, was possible. Their resilience wove the first threads of emancipation, proving that even the humblest lives could shape history. This decade was not just one of suffering, but of awakening. Ireland's poor may have lacked power, but they carried a truth that could not be silenced. Dignity was worth any struggle.
At Emerald Chronicle, we believe history is not only about kings and parliaments, but about the forgotten people whose courage shaped Ireland's destiny. The story of the 1820s is one of ordinary men and women whose sacrifices built the road toward freedom. By supporting us, you help keep their voices alive for future generations. Share this documentary, follow our work, and join us in celebrating Ireland's history, legends, myths, and folklore. Together, we can honor those who endured hardship so their descendants, at home and abroad, could carry Ireland's spirit forward.